Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Alhamdulillah wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulillah. I'd like to start with sending peace and blessings upon our beloved Master Muhammad, sallam, who is the best of creation and mercy to mankind. This is your brother Sulaiman Jahangir, and thank you very much for joining us tonight for another Ask the Sheikh show, where this time we are pleased to be joined by Scotland's very own Sheikh Amin Buxton to discuss the topic of spirituality. So, just to introduce a little bit about Sheikh Amin, he was born in London. He converted to Islam in 1999 and read Islamic and Arabic studies at SOAS, the University of London. He also studied Islamic sciences in a traditional setting in both Syria and Yemen, spending over 10 years under scholars like Habib Omar bin Hafid. He has edited and translated a number of books, which include Imam al-Haddad's Beneficial Counsels and Umar al-Khatib's Prophetic Guidance. And since 2017, he's been residing in Edinburgh. He's currently involved in several educational and social initiatives within Edinburgh and Scotland, including New to Islam, and is also Rafa International. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi.
Walaikum salam wa barakatuh.
How are you
How you
doing,
doing?
Sheikh?
Alhamdulillah, I'm good. It's good to be here.
Alhamdulillah. Excellent. How's your Ramadan been?
It's been good. It's been a little bit slow the last few days. I just had a little bit of a cold and stuff, but alhamdulillah, I'm getting better.
Allah Akbar. Allah Akbar. May Allah protect you, Sheikh. Was it COVID or
No, alhamdulillah, no, it wasn't. Thankfully, it
Alhamdulillah.
was.
Alhamdulillah, may Allah protect you, Sheikh. Inshallah. So, Sheikh, today's topic is spirituality. So, spirituality is a very, very big topic. It's very, very broad. We can take there's many stems to the conversation, and there's a couple of areas that I'd like to explore in today's conversation. And there's a couple of questions people have also sent in, personal questions to get some advice on. But before we start and delving deep into it, Sheikh, just to take it right from the basics, from the beginning, what is spirituality?
That's a good question, and it really depends who you're asking, and it's really one of those kind of words. It's very it's part of one of the words of our age, one of our time, that people can talk about spirituality, and people can say I'm a very spiritual person, and it doesn't really have a kind of definite meaning. It's very kind of subjective, and part of the kind of this modern sense of what spirituality is you can be very spiritual but not be religious. So there's a separation between religion and spirituality. People see them as being two different things. So someone can be very spiritual and not have any kind of affiliation to any religion, and therefore their spirituality is it's very subjective. It could be anything. It could be they meditate, or they have or they go on some kind of retreat, or they read some kind of poetry. It doesn't, it's a very loose kind of term, kind of catch-all term. So it really depends what you mean by spirituality. Obviously, in an Islamic context, that would take a different meaning.
Yeah, so it's interesting that you've got this very, very loose term, a term that you conversate with people, people in the workplace, people in amidst friend groups, and people say I'm spiritual, and when you ask what does that mean exactly, you get a whole host of answers from different people. So it's interesting that it means lots of things to different people. But in an Islamic context, Sheikh, what is spirituality?
In Islamic context, I mean, again, what the whole of Islam is founded on this whole spiritual experience. The whole from the time that the angel Gabriel comes down with the Quran, this and reveals revelation. It's all connected with the spirit. And when the Prophet, sallallahu peace and blessings be on him, when he describes the religion, he describes as the famous hadith of Jibreel. He describes the Islam and Iman and Ihsan. So he doesn't just stop at the outward practice. He mentions that the important foundational practice of Islam. Then he mentions the faith, Iman, and then he mentions a higher level, which is to worship God as if you see Him, and if you don't see Him, then know that He sees you. So there's right from the outset, we're told that there isn't just this one dimension to this religion. There's a deeply spiritual element to it, and something very high to aim towards. But we should never reduce Islam to something which is just practice or just our own understanding.
And Sheikh, you mentioned the Prophet gave three sections to it. So it's not just this outward aspect. So Sheikh, can you delve a little bit deeper into that? That what are these three categories?
Yeah. So Islam, we all know that this, in this hadith specifically, in the Prophet defined Islam as being the 5 pillars, which we all know and attempt to follow the the shahada and establishing the salah, giving the zakah, fasting Ramadan obviously, and performing the Hajj, and that's the kind of, so that's the physical, so to speak. But obviously even within that there's a spiritual, there's a massive spiritual level to that. At the lowest level we can do those things, and fulfill what's required from us from a legal sense, from a kind of fiqh sense of, but obviously within that there's massive levels of spiritual levels in the salah and in zakah and in fasting and in the Hajj itself. Then the Prophet mentioned and said the pillars of Iman: belief in Allah, belief in the angels, belief in the divine book, revealed scripture, belief in messengers, and belief in the Day of Judgment, and belief in Allah's decree. So that's a question of faith, and that's a something that we in our heart, what we believe in essentially. And then this final level of coming to a realization of Allah in everything, and witnessing Allah in everything, and being aware of His witnessing us. And that's a process. It's not just like with so many things in Islam. It's not just a goal that we get to and then that's it. It's an ongoing process, to try and strive towards that, and trying to aim towards that.
So ihsan is something that's almost like it's a whole nother level.
Yeah.
And you mentioned, Sheikh, something like it's like as if God sees you all the time, or you see God. In a sense. So it's almost like this transitional state that a human being attempts to go throughout their lives. And people might get onto that journey at different points and parts, depending upon when the blessings open. But it's not like a structured program of, you do this and then you get to that.
So ihsan means, comes from the meaning of making something beautiful, or making something perfect. Striving for beauty and striving for perfection. So in all that we do, in every action, big or small, whether it be an act of